AskReddit by Heracui Ranjarit. What critically acclaimed movie is hated now? I haven't seen anyone mention Captain Phillips yet. Apparently the real life guy was warned to take a much wider berth around the Horn of Africa, specifically BC, of the threat of pirates, but he wanted to save time and hope. What do you know, there were pirates. Apparently the crew was pissed the movie made him look like such a hero when the situation was basically his fault. The crew sued him and the ship line after as well and won. Song of the South won Oscars and had one of the most iconic Disney songs in the last half of the 20th century. https://www.youtube.com/watch?bxzaknh4unw Now Disney has more or less scrubbed it completely from availability. Even at the time that movie was under intense criticism and scrutiny. The NAACP picketed the movie. The congressman for NY Harlem District literally said Walt Disney is not welcome near my constituency. It's criticized today, but it's always been a controversial film. Super Size Me. The creator took a lot of liberties and people have been unable to replicate his results. He was also an alcoholic, which obviously skewed the results. He also gave us the disappointment that was where in the world is Osama bin Laden. Now, no one really expected him to hunt down and capture bin Laden, but it could have still been an interesting documentary. Part of it is, the rest is him whining about how he's missing his wife's pregnancy. If that were the case, why leave at all? The Blind Side. This movie sucks so hard. Even as a young teenager watching it, it was like, he scored high in protective instincts. Edit. It feels vindicating that this is my most upvoted comment. Glad to see a ton of other people out there found that part of the film peculiarly dumb. The Birth of a Nation. There has been a slight shift in audience sensibilities since its release. Wasn't American Sniper critically acclaimed until they found out the guy made a bunch of it up? On the other hand, Catch Me If You Can is pretty much all bullshit and the movie still rules. Crash, the Paul Haggis one. I've just realized that for years now, whenever I've heard criticism of this movie, I was confusing it with Traffic. I could never figure out why everyone was so upset about it because, while I didn't think it was exceptional or anything, I didn't think it was bad. I haven't seen Crash. Or, if I did, I don't remember it. But this explains so much. The English Patient never survived Seinfeld lighting it up for being long and boring. King of the Hill gave a solid critique, long painful boring death. Shakespeare in Love. Peak Weinstein Oscar campaigning. The cast is great and it's obviously entertaining, but Best Picture over Elizabeth or Saving Private Ryan? Yeah? No. Blue is the Warmest Color. Was critically acclaimed for being a queer movie in an industry where there were very few. Then it turned out the directed dude made it a nightmare for the leads to work in it, and this is not an unpopular opinion anymore, but the explicit scenes in the movie come across as porn, and TBH it comes off a more hypersexualized depiction of lesbians than celebration of a lesbian love story. It was when I watched Portrait of a Lady on Fire that I realized what a difference there was in the treatment of intimate scenes in both the films. Not surprisingly, the one in Portrait were respectful while the ones in Blue seemed uncomfortably graphic. For a while there, Bird Box was hot shit in the movie that everyone had to see. Now it seems like most everyone thinks it's stupid. Viral marketing at its best. My friend called it a stratothing, the movie. The English Patient. Thanks, Elaine. Edit. For those who don't know, https://yahoo.be/c5bluh1be_si_avvat_vhzj1_dd. Personally, I prefer sack lunch. The Blind Side. Supersize me. That lying piece of shit. Besides him admitting that he was an alcoholic, what else was he lying about? Blindside ain't looking too hot now that the truth about Michael O'Hare and his adopted family came out. Crash. The dumb racism is bad one, not the car accidents give James Spader a boner one. Now I'm intrigued in the latter one. Traffic, 2000, https://en.wikipedia.org/wiki/traffic_open bracket 2000 film closed bracket won 4 Oscars and had a 93% RT score. Watched it recently. It's like a really preachy and flat episode of Narcos. IDK if it's hated today, but it seems pretty much forgotten. The other big acclaimed films that year, Gladiator, Almost Famous, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, Erin Brockovich, had a lot more staying power. Is this the movie that started the trope that Mexico is yellow? I remember it being aggressively color graded. Slumdog Millionaire was not as good the second viewing onward. Fantastic soundtrack though. It was such a strange movie for an Indian to watch. Like, so much of it was obvious poverty PRN, but you could feel Danny Boyle's genuine fascination with Mumbai too. A worrying number of people took it extremely seriously. Something like watching Requiem for a Dream and thinking it represented all America as it is, but OFC it isn't. Revenge of the Nerds. It was considered one of the greatest comedies of the 80s at the time of its release. Now, given changing attitudes towards sex, specifically maybe revenge porn and rape by deception aren't actually good subjects for a comedy, the film is reviled. I'm not sure I can think of a single movie that had a larger drop in public opinion than that one. Goddamn those nerds were happy. https://yahoo.be/hq7mjfnklal?107 Armageddon was probably the most watched movie from the 90s and everyone hates it because Hollywood magic doesn't explain science. Screw you guys. That movie is fantastic and I have multiple science degrees that don't care. That movie has everything. It has the dumbest NASA ever out on screen. It has the best ensemble performance of Leaving on the Jet plane never put to film. It has space dementia. What's not to love? Well, technically a show not a movie, but from what I hear the ending of Game of Thrones basically fucked itself into oblivion and now no one talks about it anymore. I don't think I've seen a show so utterly annihilate its standing with an audience quite like GOT. It's impressive just how hard they dropped the ball. I have an answer that's the opposite of what you're asking. It's a Wonderful Life was a flop when it came out, despite Jimmy Stewart being the lead man. It performed abysmally at the box office, and was more or less forgotten about, so much so that they never renewed the copyright. And 28 plus years later when TV stations were looking for movies to play during the Christmas season, this was available and free, so they started playing it every year, and it wasn't long before seeing it every year became a tradition for many, making it one of the best loved Christmas films in the eyes of many. Yeah, I don't do a lot with my dad, but every year the two of us watch it on Christmas Eve together. It will always be one of my favorite movies for that reason. Lone Survivor. Or at least it should be hated. The only accurate part of that movie is that 3 SEALs died and Marcus was rescued by Mohammed Ghalab and the Rangers PJs. Everything else is utter bullshit. Navy SEALs in the public eye have massive history of exaggeration and blatant lying and Marcus Luttrell is no different. Frankly, I don't blame them. Making $60.80k a year for a job that you're highly likely to get killed maimed doing that carries a 95% probability of imploding your personal life, all for a government that fucks its vets over at every opportunity? Go for it, lie your ass off and make your millions. The SOG community literally studies Operation Red Wings as an example of what not to do. They made so many mistakes tactically from planning to execution. Also, it seems like every SEAL writes a book now, which makes things sticky.